All right, so I was a painter in a custom shop. Obviously, I still play around with stuff like that. And I actually started when I was about 18 years old working in a shop, which is very rare. Nobody paints that young. And so the custom shop that I worked at did flames and all that sort of thing, and they got really kind of slow because that sort of thing was kind of dying off in the 80s. I really needed a job, and I've been looking around for a while, and I couldn't find one, so there was an ad in the paper for Earl scheib as a painter. So it said interview in person. It was in Long Beach on, I think it was Anaheim Street, a really bad area of town. So I showed up to the interview and I talked to the guy. Of course, I painted this too. He's our Armenian manager, really nice guy. He was funny and everything. Well, at least to me, he was funny. But I really needed a job. I was really low on cash. I just needed some money. So I was interested in this $8 an hour job. So he asked me, listen, can you paint a car? And I'm like, dude, I'll paint the next one for you for free just to show you I can do this. So in the back seat of my Beetle, this isn't the car, but I had my milk crate with my spray gun, sander, all that stuff in there. I was ready to go. So he had a Triumph Spitfire sitting there, and this Triumph Spitfire it looked like it had been painted very recently, and it looked, like there were some issues with it, but, it was not too bad. So I sanded it down, took it in the spray booth, masked it off, sprayed it, brought it out when it was done, and the manager just goes, "Oh my God, what an amazing paint job. Can you do this all the time?" And he'd given me like 3/4 of a gallon to paint this car, which was just enough at the time. Because remember, this is before the low VOC spray guns. Now that's Triumph Spitfire looked like this car right here when I pulled it out. I mean, it was shiny. It looked good. There was no orange peel in it. It was very hard to do with that material. So I had to just keep going with it. Just keep laying the stuff on until it just started to look good. And I made it look really, really good. Came out of the booth and he goes, "Okay, well, put the rest of the paint over here and listen, we'll start you tomorrow." And I said, first thing I said was, "Well, I used all the paint." He goes, "Oh my God, no, you can't do that. You have to make it look like really good with just only a quart of paint for this little car." This is a little car. Had no roof. It was just a Triumph Spitfire. No, it was a convertible. So there wasn't much panel area on it. But in order to get it look good, I had to put more material on it. That's just what you have to do. Especially with that cheap garbage paint they had. It was such this diamond gloss. It was their own brand. And the stuff was just like terrible. The paint was kind of like lacquer and enamel mixed together. It was kind of this weird stuff. It dried way too fast. And it was just, and you'd spray it on and it would just go on really dry unless you puddled it. It was just horrible. Really hard to paint with. So the next day I was there, of course, to start for the job, and the district manager was there. And so he came over to try and help me figure out how to do nice work with no material, which is kind of a joke, right? Okay, here you go. Here's no material and make it look super bitchin'. We have this clear, okay? You can use all you want of that, okay? And I was like, all right, well, that might help a little. And we have this other stuff, this sealer. And it was basically like a primer sealer. He goes, you can use all you want of that. We don't inventory those materials. But paint, we watch every bit of paint that comes in and out of here. It was in a lock cupboard in a room. And I was like, God, this garbage paint, and you guys are, back then, a gallon of paint was $20. And they were, for a good thick paint, okay? The stuff that we worked at, I'll tell you a little bit later. I also worked at One Day Paint and Body for one day. Good story there too. But paint like a nascent synthetic enamel or high glow. High glow was like $15 a gallon. And they were watching their paint like it was some sort of like godsend crap. It was just ridiculous. It was just completely garbage material. I guess it would stick to anything because we didn't sand anything. I went to the manager. I go, "Hey, can I get some sandpaper?" He'd take a sheet like this and he'd throw it on the hood, but it would be ripped in half, and that's all I would get for the whole car. And it wasn't good quality stuff like this. It was the cheapest stuff you could buy, the open grain garbage. And I was like, hey, I need the masking, where's your masking machine at? And he kind of looks at me really puzzled. Oh, hang on. Let me see. I'm done with this already. He throws today's paper, back then, you get the newspaper. He throws today's paper on the hood of the car. And he goes, oh, and here's your roll of tape. So for every car, you got a half a sheet of sandpaper, a roll of tape, 3/4 inch, by the way. They're real thin stuff. And today's paper. And that's because he was done with it. Otherwise, you had to bring your own. So I remember collecting papers out of the trash after work on my way home, trying to make sure I had plenty of masking material for the next day. And of course, if you remember, they always had this little perforated edge on the newspaper, and you get all these little holes. And that was the manager. He cleaned that after you were done. He goes, hey, wait. I go, no, I'm going to wipe that off. He goes, no. You're taking my job away from me. I wiped that off. He's cleaning it off out there after I'm done painting. So the average customer that went to Earl Scheib was kind of interesting. The customer would show up, and typically they had, a really red face, and they smelled a little like alcohol. And there would be this fresh accident damage in their car. And they always wanted to change the color for some reason. They weren't worried about the quality. They just wanted the dent gone and the color changed on their car, just for some reason. Maybe you can guess why in the comments. I learned a lot about people in that week of working there, especially people in Long Beach. They were quite interesting folks. And the most interesting part about it was I worked in a good shop where we did high-end work, and we'd have to sell it. It was good money and whatever. And this manager did exactly the opposite of that. He'd tell people things that it was like, well, you know what? It's going to look like crap. Don't expect very much, guys. It's going to be wavy. There was going to be some paint flaws in it. And you just hear him walking around the car telling all those things that the guy wasn't going to get. It was just kind of the opposite of any kind of sales. It was like, okay, well, you're not going to get this. Okay, well, are you going to sand the car? He goes, kind of. And if you wanted that, you should have done that before you brought it to me. Well, can you mask off these emblems? He goes, we only use one roll of tape. When we run out, whatever is left, we paint it. If you want them good, take them off yourself. And if the guy was too demanding, he'd go, I'm sorry, we don't do that here. If you want a good job, you go up the street. Remember, he was an Armenian guy. Really cool dude. Loved him. He had that heavy accent. If you want a good job, you go up the street. You pay more money, you get a good job. This is Earl Scheib. We don't do that here. I mean, he was a really nice guy to me, but he was brutal with the customers. And it was the same way when the customer came to pick up the car. He'd see a paint flaw in here, and he'd go, hey, what's this run right here? And he'd go, I'd sorry, this is Earl Scheib, and we don't do that here. You want a good job? I told you, before you come, you go up the street. You spend $800, $1,000, you get a good job. Here, Earl Scheib, $100, that's what you get. So come in the office, I take your money now. Just absolutely brutal. This guy was you were going to pay. You leaving with your car, you were paying. It didn't matter what it looked like. So it was times when I was in the spray booth and I just couldn't stop laughing, okay? I'm in there painting these cars, and this paint was just so hard to lay down and get it to look good. It was just it was like spraying it with house paint but it wasn't even like that. It was car paint, but it was just sprayed awful. You come out of the gun and you just try to thin it. Of course you could use all the reducer you wanted to. And it was basically just, I think you pumped it out of a can, lacquer thinner, junk, okay? And you just try and just make it work, And so it was a really, really extremely hard thing to do. So I was talking to one of the guys, and I said, well, how do you keep from getting a dry spot with this stuff? You put it on, and you're trying to do the whole thing with one coat, okay? So, because you just couldn't use that much material. So, I would use a coat of sealer sometimes. I'd just dry coat it with sealer and trying to get it to look good. I remember a silver car. The silver just absolutely was transparent. It was just 99% binder, 10% metallics, and it just looked like crap. So I was talking to the guy about how do you, I think it was the district manager, was how do you make this stuff look good with that little material? And he goes, well, what the other guy did is he would start at the quarter panel back here, and he would go, I think it was this direction. And then when you were done, you would do the door, and then you would just spray off the door to keep from getting a dry spot. And even at that, it was extremely hard to paint. Meanwhile, you're spraying this thing and overspray is just going inside the car. That's fine. Nobody cares. You just barely get this thing to look like, like crap. It just fully looked like crap. There's just nothing, as much as you could work on it, as hard as you wanted it to, you couldn't make it look much better than just absolutely garbage. And so it was this vicious cycle. Again, the customer would come in, you do 6-7 cars a day or something like that. Customer would come in, look like he just was hung over and maybe drunk over, and just bring his car in, and he just wanted the color changed and the fender fixed or whatever. Take this car, mill it over, it looked like absolute crap, and then they would come, and the manager he'd be like, oh, what about this here? And, oh, I told you, this is Earl scheib. You don't get that. And so literally, I was in the spray booth sometimes just absolutely just laughing. You know, I had to have the fans on really loud. When the fans on, they couldn't hear me. And I'm just busting up laughing in there, spraying cars into tears, you know, and coming out the door. I loved that job. I wish I had it now. That was so much fun. I got to just make things look like crap and people paid for it. I found that absolutely fascinating after working in a custom shop where we did everything really, really nice, and the customer would come back, hey, what about this little spot here? He'd be like, manager would look at it and go, oh, no, I'm sorry, this is Earl scheib. We don't fix that. You want to bring it back in 2 weeks? I'll do it no charge. But I promise you, it won't look much better than it does right now. So you probably just leave it the way it is. And after getting beat up by this Armenian guy, you know, they would usually just cave and just go, okay, fine, whatever. I'm taking the car. What do I want? It was $100. Okay, whatever. So I'm going to tell you guys about the body man. This was totally another really interesting situation. So the body man drove a green Dodge flat nose van. And if you know anything about those old times back in the 80s, those were really undesirable. Nobody wanted one. Wasn't the cool looking Ford one or the Chevy, it was the Dodge. Slant 6, whole 9 yards. Metallic green, if you can imagine that. The guy was really kind of interesting too. He actually had really long hair, and he used a lot of one-word sentences like, yep, that's it, yep, okay. And I think later on is when I realized that he probably was fresh out of prison and used to not saying anything. So that was probably the deal there. Long hair, really like primitive tats, which was not cool at that time. And one-word sentences or 2 words. Yeah. So he'd get these cars in there, okay, and they were wrecked. Okay, you could just tell it was a fresh, you know, fender bender from whatever, the bar maybe the night before. I don't know. Okay, and they're wanting the color changed. Okay, so it was like, usually it was like a, how would I say, like a Buick or Oldsmobile. Again, cars that weren't really desirable. And he'd be in there pulling the fenders out, you know, pulling with a slide hammer. And he really just had just a basic set of tools, really basic. He might have had a Porter Power for really bad stuff, but he had mostly a slide hammer like this one that you get at the swap meet with a sheet metal screw in the end of it. And he had a punch that went along with that. Basically a punch. Very rarely. He had a drill, but he never used it. He had a punch and a claw hammer and a couple of different sizes blocks of wood. Kind of like these here. And I remember having a little bit of dead time, and I go over to his area to see how the car was coming along. I go, so what'd you do? What are you doing to that? Usually, I don't think he'd even answer. He'd just kind of look at me, or just kind of, he wouldn't even look at me. He'd use all the time. He would just kind of just stare. And then I go, what did you get for that? He's like, $50. So he'd take this punch, and he'd just punch a hole in the area. He'd screw this thing in there, and he'd just start yanking on, bam, 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 kabam. And then it would just this giant mushroom hole where this screw would just pull out of the metal, and he'd kind of knock it down a little with a hammer. And I go, you gonna grind it to bare metal? And he goes, nah, for $50, that's all they get. What about that dent over there? Oh, that's the free one. I'm just filling that. Remember, they used to say sometimes $10 with a free bodywork, right? So no grinding, nothing to make it bare metal. This old filler stuff that we used back in the day, Bondo brand, it would not stick to paint that was not sanded or not bare metal. So literally, I mean, this stuff was going to fall off going down the road, like near future. And nobody cared. And I'd take that sucker from the body man over to the paint shop and have a great time laughing the whole time I'm in the spray booth. Couldn't believe it. It was absolutely funny. I think that body man's favorite word was nah. That was usually covered the complete sentence of everything he had to say. The only time he used the grinder was to knock down the Bondo. Knock it down with a grinder, hit it with a little sander. 2 minutes later, okay, bring it over to me. And usually back then, the painter was the guy who would primer it and sand it, and I'd shoot a couple coats of primer. I think he actually primed it as to bring it over. I think that's what they normally did. And then it was kind of different. And then I'd go over and sand it a little bit, and then I'd be like, God damn, that feels like crap. I mean, it feels like just an ocean, just terrible. And I'm like, oh, that's what they're getting. I got 2 more cars behind this one, so I got to get on it. I remember one of the cars that was in the shop was a Pinto, and he was working on the right front fender, just like this right here. It had this giant dent in it, like just this big old dent, like they just ran into something and just, and he just had like 5 or 6 of those giant holes from the slide hammer being pulled out. And I was like, hey, you're not going to grind that or anything? He goes, nah, that's what they get. And man, I'll tell you, it was like that every day. Completely hilarious. Every time I went over there, it was just a commie. So about halfway through the car, you kind of run out of tape because you needed really 3 rolls of tape to tape a whole car off. So you'd have to kind of figure out which was the most important things to cover. Anything intricate like a little logo, painted. This sort of thing, painted. Most of the time, I didn't have enough tape to tape the molding, so they got painted. Usually I'd make it through about 3 or 4 of the windows, and the last one I would just kind of use a cardboard shield and kind of hold it up there and spray it so I didn't get too much on it. So sometimes if I had time, I'd be out there with the manager, cleaning off or whatever I could get off the glass. And whatever we didn't get off, we left it there. Customer would show up, just a vicious cycle of, I'm sorry, this is Earl scheib. That's the best you get. I tried to tell you to go up the streets and pay more money if you want a good job. So come to my office. We need to make your bill out. They'd go in there, never would try and argue with them. They would get absolutely nowhere. And it was great having a manager that back you up. You get a fat run on the side because you're trying to get this material to cover or whatever. There was grease on it and you didn't have time to clean it. Or whatever, okay? And you were just like, he's like, I'm sorry, that's all you get. So come into my office, let's make your bill. Pretty sure it was cash only too. I'm sure they didn't take any kind of credit cards. My favorite thing was when a guy brought in his car doing his own prep. And it was a Hispanic guy, brought in I think it was a Pontiac Trans Am or whatever the equivalent was of that car. And he brought that in to get it painted, and he didn't really speak much English at all, and so the manager didn't really speak Spanish, and so the guy says, well, do you speak some Spanish? Well, I'm like, yeah, I can speak some body shop Spanish, because I've used to having guys that spoke Spanish. I worked in a body shop many years ago. It was like it was in a backyard, okay, so and literally this guy, it was like you had this garage door and 2 garage doors on the garage. So the garage door would open. It looked like a regular house from the street. The first garage door would open, and then there was another garage door behind that one. And you'd drive all the way through, and then obviously hear all these sanders. That was an interesting job, too. I can tell you about that one. And all these guys back there, and I think I was the only guy who there that spoke English. And I learned a lot of Spanish, learned a lot of great things from some good people. So this guy shows up with this Trans Am, okay? And it looked like he used a disc sander of some sort. Maybe it was a grinder because it really had very, very, very heavy sanding scratches in it all over the entire car. So there's this whole thing had these round grinder marks in the whole paint. Like he tried to remove some paint or something. And so the manager wanted me to tell him, that stuff was going to show. And so I was like, the lija here in the Spanish means like sanding. Aquí es no bueno. It's going to be showing up everywhere. You're going to have sanding scratches all over the car. He goes, no, it's okay. I want a negro. Dude, do you want this thing black? He's like, no, I want a negro. I said, these are all going to show really bad. He says, I know, it's okay. Negro, completo, please. So let me tell you something. There's nothing worse than a black paint job with giant scratches and circles all over the car. I'd never seen anything so horrible in my whole life until I saw that car when I painted it. So I'm like, okay, here we go. Go in the spray booth, have a laugh session. I'm in the spray booth. I swear I had to stop 2 or 3 times in the middle of that car because I was laughing so hard when I'm putting the paint on this car, and it just looks like absolute garbage. I mean, the good thing about the black is it always covered, so I don't have to worry about that. But there was no way, any way in this world I could put enough paint or put it on anything to get rid of those scratches. It just looked like a giant swirly mess. And so I was anticipating this guy coming back, and just giving me, giving us hell about this car. And the manager even was like, I don't know how this is going to go. And so I said, because we told him, we tried to tell him it's going to look like crap. And he comes over to pick it up, and he goes, I said, okay, there you go. And he goes, oh, it's bueno. Beautiful. I was like, really? I'm just like doing everything I can not to laugh. I'm just going around just like, okay. And he goes, oh no, tell the manager to go on in there and pay your money. I got to tell you, that was probably the most horrific thing I've ever seen in my entire life in the painting world. It just looked terrible. The entire thing was just covered in scratches, and the guy's like, it's okay. I like it. I'm like, okay, whatever. Next. So I remember another car that was really bad that came in, and it was this, I was like a Buick Skylark, full-bodied, not a front-wheel drive, the earlier ones before they were front-wheel drive, like 674, 5, somewhere in there. Totally undesirable car maybe at that, now it'd be really cool to own, but back then it was just totally uncool. It was either that or Oldsmobile. I can't remember one of the two. And again, same thing. It had these little, on the sides, it had like a, like a little logo that got painted. Ran out of tape. I mean, way early on that one because it was big windows and all this stuff. So this guy picked the silver, and that was a really bad idea. The car was silver, and there was areas in the car where the paint had burned off because it was the old silvers before they had clear on them like this, where the clear, there's no clear, so it just kind of wore off, and there was black underneath it. I'll tell you about my helper in a second. I did have a helper that showed up. I didn't even know it. I was like, who's this guy? Oh, he's your helper. Oh, okay. Spoke absolutely no English. Whatever you'd say, he'd just look at you and smile. I think that was the only thing he knew, how to smile and look at you. It was quite interesting, guys. I remember telling the helper to go and sand one of the cars, and he starts sanding it like this, just sanding the whole thing. I'm like, no. So I tell him, lija el carro completo, and that's what he starts doing. He starts doing that. That means sand the car. So then I said, no. I said, lija el carro simile por la lavar. And he goes, what? Like you're going to wash it. I said, just sand this like this. Uno tieme, one time. Oh, okay. That's how we sanded them, just like we were washing it or tack ragging it down. That's all they got. So I fired up the old spray gun, sprayed a little bit over that. I tried to just paint over the black, and it was like, nope, that is not going to cover. No, I could put a million coats on there. It's just completely transparent. The silver was absolutely garbage. So again, when the good old manager or district manager showed up, he goes, well, you can use all the sealer you want. He goes, one of the guys adds sealer to the paint. I'm like, okay, time to break that out. I'm gonna have to try something because this is not gonna work. So like I added a bunch of sealer to the paint, and I just add a little bit of paint to it because you know, it was a big car, and I sprayed the whole thing with the sealer, and that didn't cover, you know, this black areas in the car, and just no matter what it just looked like crap, absolutely garbage. And I don't know if that one had accident damage. I think that guy just wanted a freshen it up thing. I was like, bad idea, dude. Should have paid a little more money and went to One Day. I think Earl scheib was like $99 if I remember right, or it was $119, and One Day was like $159 or something like that. It was, you got a way better job. So I go around dusting this car with this sealer and paint mix, and it just you know, dry spotted, and just, you know, it was terrible. And so I go, wow, God, you know, I got a little more paint left in my 3/4 of a gallon that they called a gallon. That was an Earl scheib gallon. Earl scheib gallon had that much off of the top, basically a whole quart off the gallon. They called it a gallon. So they called it an Earl scheib gallon. It's just like, we're using high pressure spray. So I had, you know, I was basically turning my spray gun into a HVLP gun. You know, this is before they had those. So you turn down your air, and you turn up, you know, trying to turn up the materials just enough to where you just kind of mist it on and not get too much go into the air. You know, you're really trying to play with the settings on the gun and all this stuff. So I'm dusting this thing over it, and I'm going, oh my God, this looks like absolute crap. I mean, it's not covering the black. And so I got done, and I took more silver again, and I dust coated it, and of course that didn't work because that made it look really dull and dry spotted, even worse. And tried to do that to try and blend it because I had no slow reducer. You know, usually when you have metallics, you know, you need like a slow reducer, and you drop coat it with the spray gun nice and far away. Oh no, we weren't going there at all, ever at Earl scheib. It was like whatever came off the gun, that was what you did. There was absolutely no material to do that. So, but I had to try and do something. So I was dust coating it with the silver, and you know, and it just couldn't, just everywhere the black spots were, you could just see them. You could just see right through it, you know, faintly. So I get done, bring it out of the spray booth. Of course, the owner calls him out on it. You know, calls him out. There's black spots in the doors, and he goes, "What do you want? This is Earl scheib. That's what you get." Backed me right up. I was cool. He probably came back for a no charge after a couple of weeks, but I was gone by then. So the word's going around in the shop. I'm like, well, what happened to the other painter? I mean, how did he do this? And he goes, well, he's a drug addict, and he's on drug hiatus right now. I'm like, oh Lord, I hope this guy doesn't show up and, you know, want his job back, because he's going to be on me like crazy. So finally the guy shows up on Friday or something, and I'd worked there a whole week and I had a blast. But he shows up, and in this Beetle, I think it was a Beetle, and it was painted, he painted it in the shop, and you could see right through all of it. And it was yellow. Of course, that doesn't cover anyway, but it was kind of a yellow Beetle. And he shows up, and I could just tell this guy was strung out. I mean, I guess he just ran out of money and was needing his job back. And I don't know, something happened, and the manager was telling me that this is beyond him. He says, I like you, I want you to stay. And I said, well, I don't mind this job, it's fun. I've never had so much fun in my life painting. Absolutely no stress, because whatever happened in that spray booth, the manager would back you up. You were good. So this guy shows up after a drug hiatus, and the manager's like, oh, it's beyond me, I can't do anything. And you know, I think it was something like, if I remember right, it was something like family member, cousin of the owner or something, and he, you know, we have to give him his job back. So I'm sorry, you have to go. So I was actually kind of bummed, you know, because I really liked spraying in there. It was just like, you could do anything. You could screw up as bad as possible, and whatever it was, when you brought it out of the spray booth, manager would back you up, no problem. I'm sorry, this is Earl scheib. We don't do that here. Come in the office, pay me. So I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about One Day Paint and Body. There were some other interesting things that happened there. The manager or one of the owners or something showed up, and he drove in a Cadillac, and it was like, and he rode in the back, and I guess somebody told me it was family, or I really don't know, but they said this guy was the owner or investor or something, and he came in, and it was almost like, I mean, I don't know if it was Italian or I thought he had an accent or something, but it just had a suit on, and he was in the back of a Cadillac, and he comes out, and the manager comes out, and I see this guy show up, and he goes, "Oh, this is the owner or something," and he says, "You need to come out and talk to him because he wants to talk to you." And I'm like, "Oh Lord." And I go out there, and there's this guy like in a suit, and he's like talking like, I don't know if he's like Italian or I don't think so, because everybody else told who he wasn't Italian, but I have a vague memory of that. But this guy basically, it sounded like he was like almost like a mafia or something. He was like, because it was in the back seat of a limousine, short limousine Cadillac, and he's like, you need to do a good job here, and blah, blah, blah. And we're like, "Oh yes sir, yeah I will. Don't worry about that," and I don't know. But it was kind of weird. I got a little scared that day. It's the only time I had a little bit of fear when I was there. The thing you remember is at that time I was only like 21 years old, and I was kind of fearful. I'd never been around anything like that. My parents were normal people that were together for the whole time. I never lived I lived in a kind of a crappy neighborhood, but nothing nearly like that area. And this guy in the car, it could have been actually Eddie. People said that maybe later it was Eddie, and I didn't really know. He was older than me. He didn't seem like he was that old, but at the time it seemed really old to me. But he was sitting in the back of the car, and he's telling me to do a good job, make sure, blah, 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 I'm going to take care of my customers and that sort of thing. And it was kind of intimidating. So guy, 21 years old. So it could have been Eddie. I know Eddie's commented on one of my videos on this, and that's cool. I don't know if Eddie's still around. I don't know how old Eddie is now, but he did comment on the video a couple times in that other video I made, and it was really cool that he wasn't upset or anything, but it was just a interesting kind of intimidating conversation that I'd never had before in my life. So it was kind of weird, but anyway, Earl Scheib was, it was what it was. It was a cheap place to get something painted. And that's what it was. Then that's what it continued to be. It wasn't, they weren't going to let it become, it was the cheapest thing you could get. So that's what you got for the money you spent. And people go, "Oh, well, they should have done a better job." Well, then you should have just paid more. That's the way. If you want a better job, then you pay more. And that was the whole idea of the whole place. So it was a really great place for what they did. They helped a lot of people that needed their car color changed and a dent fixed real quick. And it was great for that. Anyway, we'll talk to you about the other stuff a little bit later. But anyway, let's talk about One Day for a minute, because you guys, this was an interesting topic as well. So One Day Paint and Body. So again, I just left Earl Scheib, and One Day was hiring, and it was about the same wage. I think it was like $8 an hour, $8.50, or no, it wasn't even that. It wasn't even $8. It might have been a little bit less, because he goes, "Oh," I remember going over there, and there's this Hispanic guy in the spray booth painting a VW Beetle. So this was like the complete opposite of Earl Scheib. Okay, this Hispanic guy's in there spraying a Beetle. Okay, and he is just laying it down. I mean, he's in there, and you could just see him just going really, really fast, and just going around. It was like in the morning, and he was just hauling ass through this thing, and I'm like going, "My God!" He goes, "1 car every 20 minutes." I'm like, "What? You got to paint 1 car every 20 minutes in the spray booth? How can you do good?" He pulled it out of the booth, and there's one little tiny run on a Beetle. It used to be because the car's all assembled. It was like one little tiny run right here. And the manager goes, "Oh no, we're gonna have to redo that one." I mean, the car looked gorgeous. No orange peel in the whole thing. I don't even know how the guy could get that much paint on it in 20 minutes. And and make it look that good. I mean, he literally had the spray gun turned up all the way, though. You could just see this. He was like running at probably 70, 90 pounds and just hosing that thing just as fast as he could move that gun, just going at it. All right. So I was a little intimidated at that job because I'm used to doing stuff slow, methodical, doing a good job. And then, the customer pays $500 for what we do, some graphics on the side of the car. It'd take us only a day to do. And here they are doing, $159, I'm going to say. I mean, it was $149 at the time. I don't remember exactly the price, but it was something around there. And he's doing the whole car and for the basic price. That was the basic job. Of course, they'd always upsell everything. And with the job that I wasn't to replace him. It was because if he said, you need to do that, I was like, there's just no way I could do it. I knew that was just beyond my, I'd been painting, since I was 18. I'd been painting like 4 or 5 years by then. And there was no way I could do that. I mean, how did that guy do that? And it was almost like he was on drugs. He was just going so fast. I mean, just hauling ass all over the whole car. And he goes, well, he does about 12 cars a day, and then that's it. He can't do any more. I said, well, of course. Who can do like more than 12 cars a day and move your arm that hard, fast and not have shoulder issues and everything else after like a year? I mean, it was completely a slave driving place. So the 1 day paint job, everything on the whole car was machine sanded and hand sanded. Everything. They go through and machine sand all this here, everything down so that everything was rough. And they would shoot a full gallon of synthetic enamel with reducer on the car. So you got a lot more thickness of paint. It still only lasted about a year. That was it. After a year, it would die out. And of course, anything extra was extra body work. So if you prepped it yourself and you primed stuff and you took it there when they baked it in the oven and it would, anything happened, it was your fault. You'd sign off a waiver and, because when that guy was done spraying, it was smooth. There was nothing wrong. But when they put it in the oven, they got it real hot and then he would bring it out and, deliver it the same day or whatever. It would come out pretty good. Usually you bring it there the day before and then next day you'd pick it up or whatever, because they just went through cars like crazy. So all the dealers all went there and I ended up doing the spot repair. So they had this wall, whatever paint that they used over in the other area, they had this wall of all this different scrap paints. And they brought them over from the main painter's area. They'd keep bringing them over in carts or whatever. They would put them on the wall. And I go, so I'm there doing spot repairs, okay? And they go, hey, make the color for this. And I was like, well, where's the mixing machine? He goes, right there on the wall. I'm like, oh, so you got to scrap match everything? He goes, yeah. So what if I don't have a toner I need? He goes, well, so we'll bring one over. So I remember they had a Ford Ranger and it has a little tiny drip rail about that big on it. And I'm scrap matching the color, which it takes a lot of time. And they expected me to do it in like 2 minutes. Just make the color. I was like, whatever. So I scrap matched and made the drip rail, painted it, and he goes, oh, it's a little off, but it's fine. I'm like, yeah, right. It was almost 99% on. How can you get a perfect match without blending or anything? He just wanted me to paint that, and that's it. Because at the time, I was pretty good at scrap matching. I learned that from the Hispanic guy with the body shop behind the house. You drove through the house, you drove through the garage, and then the spray booth was the garage. The two ends of the garage would shut, and that was the spray booth, and we didn't bring any cars in and out. While that was going on, they just parked them on the street. So it was quite interesting. Well, the Hispanic guy taught me how to scrap match. So he used to go, what does that color need? I go, I don't know. He goes, well, don't you see it? Is it this one here is bluer, and that one there's a little greener? And I go, oh, yeah, it is, huh? And he'd go, okay, so go find me some green metallic, for this color. And I'd find something and he'd show it to me. He goes, no, that's not pure enough. We need something a little more pure. And he taught me how to do it. So I learned a lot from him, and that's what I used in that area. again, doing that, it takes a lot of time to scrap match. I mean, I matched this color and I got it really nice. And I used some scrap matching techniques to do it because I couldn't get them to mix it right. So I had to do that a few times. But it just takes a lot of time. I mean, it took me 2 weeks of time to really get this color perfect. And so to do that, it took more time than what I was allowed to do, you know. So I was always behind. I was always behind. I was there one day. I worked there one day for one day. So I went ahead and I worked there. And at the end of the day, the guy doing the completes had one or more car he couldn't do. His arm was done. You know, I mean, I'd have been done after 2. I don't know how he did 12, but yeah, he comes over with the last car of the day, and it's a dealership, you know, 159 or 199 cheap paint job. So it's got primer spots all over it. It's sanded beautifully, and I'd never used that cheap material they had because it was high glow synthetic enamel, I believe, or after that I got better at using that stuff. But at that time, I'd only been using higher grade, you know, lacquer base, and then urethane clears. Everything looked, you know, pretty nice. And I was used to using those materials, and synthetic enamel was a little bit different. Instead of spraying it on and letting the coats dry, you just spray one coat on and you keep going. You know, it was just keep wetting it, keep going into it. And I didn't understand, you know, I put it on, let it set up a little too long. So this car came in, and it was that, I want to say, copper color. If you remember the copper color, it was it was copper color. It was the Ford LTD, the smaller one, the LTD, like an 82 car came in, and it was this copper color, and they didn't have anything close to it. So I had to make this color. I'm adding, you know, gold and red and a little bit of, you know, stuff to make it. So I finally get the color right, and it's like, you know, I'd say an hour before we close, and I got the thing all masked off finally, and it's like an hour before we close. And so I go, God, I got to spray this thing in my booth. You know, I just got done. I'd worked my ass off. I was tired at the end of the day, you know, of going through all the stress of mixing colors and touching up shit, you know, all day. So I go and I spray this thing, okay, and I'm just blowing it on there, right? And I put a coat on, let it kind of tack up a little too long. Of course, you can't do that with synthetic. You just keep going. So I go and I go to shoot the next coat on. I start to spray it again, and I don't know if I didn't have my pressure up high enough, whatever. I just wasn't used to the material. But after about second coat, and I'm going to do my third, I start to see the runs coming down. And so everything back down low in the car just started sagging. And I'm like, oh no. Maybe I didn't get the bottom wet enough, whatever, as I was too tired at the end of the day. And just the runs just started coming down. I'm like, oh. So I remember going over. It was 5 o'clock. Okay, time to go. Whatever. We got to finish up. I'm like, yeah. I just got to do this last little bit, and I'm out of here. I turned the lights off on the booth. I left, and I never went back. I was like, you guys are slave drivers. I am not working here. And I never went back to even get paid for that day because, I mean, somebody had a lot of sanding to do. And that old synthetic enamel, I'm going to tell you, it was weeks before they could repaint that car. Weeks. You had to try and scrape off all you could, maybe solvent wash it off. It was a mess. They were going to have a problem. So that's why I was like, I'm out of here. And I never went back. And that was, I tell you, if you were going to get a paint job back then, the one-day paint job was way better than the Earl scheib. At least it got prepped. But, and of course, Mako has since then bought them. And they're still, I mean, people go, oh, Mako paint jobs are garbage and all this stuff. Well, you know, I mean, for the price you pay, I guess it's what you get, you know. So, anyway, I thought you guys enjoyed this video. I know I had a lot of people wanting to hear more about the Earl scheib experience, and a little bit better filming now than I was then. So maybe, hopefully this makes it fun for you guys. I'll talk to you next one. Please like, share, and subscribe.